welcome to the brand new Startup Central. I'm Nayantara Rai. First up, thank you for tuning in today evening, an evening that coincides with the mega semi-final World Cup match between India and New Zealand. You saw the two skippers first meet when they were under 19, when Virat Kohli did beat Williamson. And I bet it's going to be a repeat performance. Having said that, yes, I'm not wearing blue. I'm bleeding orange today, just in case, we meet England in the final come Sunday the 14th. But back to business. First up, my email address, the show's email address, the Twitter handle on your screen. Stay in touch with us, folks. Tell us what you want to see on the show, what you don't want to see on the show. Pitch to us. Maybe you could even make it to Startup Central. With that out of the way, let's get down to the first story. We're continuing to put the spotlight on Nirmala Sitharaman's maiden budget. India's first full-time woman finance minister, during her budget speech, spent quite a bit of time talking about startups as well as entrepreneurship. It's a topic that we dedicated on the show yesterday as well. We got to a mixed reaction. Today, we're continuing that conversation with a whole host of entrepreneurs in India's very own Silicon Valley, Bengaluru.
Hello and welcome to this very special edition of ET Now Startup Central, a daily show dedicated to startups, entrepreneurship, innovation, technology, everything really regarding the new economy. And I'm coming to you from the K-Tech Innovation Hub here in Bengaluru. What a budget this has really been for startups as well, with multiple mentions really in the budget, from digital payments push, the angel tax clarity, to a lot more SOPs for the SME sector. Joining me are entrepreneurs. We've got your big investors on the show decoding the budget. But what does it really mean for the founder really solving problems? We have startups from across the space really part of this to take us through the impact and what the real issues are. Guys, thank you so much for taking out the time and joining us on ET Now. What is your sense of the budget? I see a few familiar faces 4 months back for the budgets. We have 2 budgets behind us now. We have a lot to discuss and really catch up. What's your sense of the budget and the key takeaways for you?
Yeah, I can start. So my name's Rohit. I run a fintech company called Nira. I think we can welcome the fact that startups did receive particular attention and focus in this budget. Some people were complaining, I saw actually, that things like the funds of funds or the actual money being delivered to startups wasn't coming through, or they didn't meet expectations. For me, it's not so much about trying to get money from the government. It's more about the ease of setting up business, ease of raising our own funds. So I think some good things did happen there, like as you mentioned in your intro, the resolution of the angel tax issue. Now the alternative investments, there's some relaxations there on the valuation. So things like that were definitely positive. As a fintech company, one thing that's relevant for us, and honestly I'm not sure this was going to come from the budget, is the confusion around eKYC.
Now that the costs have gone up.
Yeah,
really.
So that was something that caught the market by surprise last year when there was a Supreme Court verdict.
That barred private companies from accessing
That's
data.
right,
Really.
yeah. So we look forward to more clarity on that in the future, but the starting point of the budget I think was positive.
All right, you've covered a lot of ground, and I think one interesting part was the long-term capital gains tax if you're selling a house and investing it in startups. That none of us really saw it coming, so that also came by. But he interestingly spoke about the ease of starting up, the ease of fundraising. He may not want money from the government, but if there is money in startups looking to the fund of funds was there. But largely, has things really improved on the ground? Budget aside, over the last 4 or 5 years, Startup India really, life has gotten easier on the ground?
Definitely yes. As the months go by, they're finding more clarity as to what needs to be fixed. Even if you look at this, this time budget, they made it very clear about the important, the sector where they wanted to pay more attention, which was taxation. There was a lot of confusion around it, where they used to take the, base, as far as the
In terms of taxation itself and how departments can work closely among each other.
Yes, there was a lot of confusion around it. A lot of them are relieved to know the fact that they're trying to work towards the same. There's more and more clarity towards the taxation. What I really like the most is that, see, not all the startups get to a stage where they pay taxes, or they get to a stage where they get into that particular problem. The biggest challenge itself was to provide a platform for startups to even, come out and gain all the benefits what this government is trying to provide. The 100 incubation centers what they're trying to set up itself is a very good step to start with. I think that's one of the very important factor. If you, as per what I see, not as I said, not every startup makes it to that level where they get to a stage where they have issues with taxation.
Yeah, a lot of startups are beyond the ambit of taxation and trying to solve smaller problems in tier 2, tier 3 towns where the incubation centers
Exactly,
play a very
that's a
crucial role.
brilliant move, according to what how I would like to see. So yeah.
Anything you want to add? What were you particularly looking forward to in the budget? But also now that startups have become mainstream, right? Gone are the years when startups did not find a mention in the budget, nor did entrepreneurs look forward to it. But that has, of course, changed over the last few years.
Yeah, I think I'm just going to divide it as good and neutral. What is good about the budget this
So you're not
time?
pessimistic. It's good and
No,
neutral.
I think it's
and not
overall
good.
it's a great thing. Just dividing it into two. Like to begin with, angel tax, the relaxation that we have is definitely a good move for us. Also, the fact that we have little more relaxation on the valuation bit, and justifying that is definitely good for an early stage startup.
Yeah, the fact that you won't
particularly.
have a tax man constantly asking you
Yeah.
about the valuation of your.
Yeah, also the fact that the eKYC thing is there, and I also think it is good that for startups which file declarations regularly, we have a bit of benefit there, which also encourages us to stay on top of all the declarations that we need to provide. However, I think the clarity on what kind of declarations are included in that is something that we need to get deeper into. What is neutral is, of course, the DD
TDS refunds.
the DD channel network, which is being encouraged, is definitely great.
Yeah, the government now wants to
yeah.
step into what we guys are doing covering startups.
Yes. So I think that's a great move. Like when we see success stories regularly, it just gives us more confidence to do a lot more better. So it's a faster learning curve for us.
Okay, I'm missing out on the channel part. I'm glad you brought it up. You want to add to that a dedicated channel by the government for startups to engage with the government, to engage with the investors?
Well, yes, I think to that point, I just wanted to mention that along with DD, probably a little more newer digital platforms could also be great. So that's the only neutral part, which I would say.
All right. Your take on the DD channel for startups, talking about 24-hour channel, access to government officials, investors, that's the plan that they have as of now at least.
Well, my name is Sakshi and I'm from WebMobi. I'm the co-founder of WebMobi. We have a platform, it's a SaaS-based platform for events and attendee engagement platform. So with respect to the DD channel, it's a good move. However, I feel that DD channel, I don't know how much benefit it will give to the startups overall. It will be better to have a digital platform like we have a platform. We can do something for the government if they give us a chance to do it. We already have a platform which is out there. It's a ready-to-use platform. We just have to have the information, and it was live, and it will be done within like few days time. Unlike the governments, as we all know, governments take a lot of time to doing something. If they give a chance, there's a lot of talent out here. If they look at these talents, these incubators that they have, the first step towards promoting these startups is to get these startups to showcase these startups, and the best way is to give them the opportunity. If they are giving a DD channel, why not give these startups showcase? Like we, WebMobi, can showcase a startup. All these startups here can use our platform. It's a digital platform. They can have platforms. It's simple app on there and they can be updated. I see a lot of events happening in here, but what is the challenge? Even I, as a person who is sitting here, have missed out certain events here, although I was deeply interested, because we as startup founders, workers here do a lot of multitasking, and it's
So you're saying
important
a lot
to have.
can be done in terms of not only a DD channel for startups, but in increasing the engagement with the government itself.
Exactly.
I think,
And also it's about more about versus thrival versus survival. These two things in India, it's more about survival for the startups compared to thrival. If you see at Western counterparts, these companies at the very beginning get a lot of support from the government, which we do not get in India. So what we do, we find out ways where we can actually survive. It's more
the
about
Indian jugaad, really.
Yes, so there should be ways where they can have more access, and it's not just the funds can be given to the early stage startup within like first few months, 2 to 3 months, without a lot of paperwork and a lot of CAs, which obviously startups cannot afford to pay.
Got it. You know, she brought up an interesting point about also the government being a customer. I think you work closely with a few state governments. How has that experience been? And, you know, we will of course have to see how these initiatives pan out, but would you want the government to open up and accept startups as their customers, considering, you know, their startups solving problems across areas that the government can also find?
Let me first introduce myself. My name is Ruchir Kanakia. I am the co-founder of an insurance technology company called GoPlanner. We've closely worked with government of Maharashtra we were part of their first fintech accelerator, and the experience was phenomenal. It was the first step in the right direction. I think they also opened up a sandbox and they're doing their bit, right? But I guess changing behavior or bringing about a big change takes time. So we have to be a little patient here on that front. Secondly, I welcome the budget because it's opened up 100% FDI for insurance, right? And that's sort of will help us raise money in a much, now it just opens up the entire world to us. Earlier it was a 49% sort of a intermediary driven route. So I guess I echo to Rohit's voice saying that if I guess all of us are there and we just need the support in terms of to do the business in a very transparent manner, right? We don't want gray areas or areas where if we have to engage with the government, we should know whether this is legal, this is not legal, what we should be doing, what we should not be doing. If they solve ease of business in terms of taxation to regulated sectors to everything, I guess this government would have done something which has not happened.
And there's always something to do as far as ease of doing business is
Yes,
concerned.
absolutely.
Right? The new challenges
Absolutely.
that come up, you're working with multiple departments. One
Yes.
department is in tandem, the other one isn't.
Transparency, right, like is the core focus. If they become even a little more transparent, and if there is a process around bringing about transparency, that I guess will help all of us here, right? Whether it comes from GST or whether it comes for NBFC when it comes to Rohit, or whether it comes for insurance when it comes to me, right? This is what I am looking forward to, and hopefully I will see some steps in the right direction. The budget was phenomenal, though. I really thought it was the first step where we will look forward. It set a very high bar for the next budget.
Got it. Yeah, the expectations are high. We've covered a lot of ground in terms of what the budget has addressed, what it can, but any gray areas that you really point out? You know, one thing that while I interact with startups, getting talent on board is tough. It's a startup one. You somehow convince the talent to come on board. You have ESOPs, and now with amazing exits, employees wanting to come on board and do want ESOPs. But the taxation around ESOPs itself is a debate in itself, right? That did not sort of find mention as well.
Yes, my name is Dr. Tarun. I'm co-founder of Vital Health. Yes, in my view, I think still sort of the policies around ESOPs have to evolve. I think the dynamic nature of the instrument has to be understood very well, both at the investor level as well as at the entrepreneur level. In my view, there is still a little bit of ambiguity at the investor level when to bring in and what to utilize it for. At the same time, entrepreneurs do not necessarily understand in terms of how to leverage it at what periods of time. So in my view, it gets utilized, you could say, conveniently at both ends. I don't want to sort of single out either the investors or policy, or for that matter entrepreneurs around it. I think a clarity and education is required for everybody, all the stakeholders to understand how to use it, including
And the
talent.
potential is
And the
high,
potential
right?
is
Now,
high.
we've seen some amazing exits in this space, and early employees really becoming lakhpatis and crorpatis.
Correct. But I think I also would want to bring in, because sort of we are going in you could say a time frame where everything is getting compressed. I think no longer you have startups who are talent who's willing to sort of wait 5 years or 8 years and then sort of cash it out. So I think so the time compression is playing at that level. So talent is not necessarily waiting for 5-8 years to take their sort of dividends at that time frame. Number one. Number two, I also think that the issues around taxation will come again in the way of a lot of such employees who do not understand this instrument. When actually when the time comes for them to exercise, they would find it difficult to, you could say, use this and take.
Yeah,
out.
and when the government wants startups as an engine to be job creators, then you have to also sort of ease out, hurdles. And taxation, I think, has sort of stood out, be it ESOPs or angel tax or TDS refunds that a lot of startups were asking has to be really processed faster. So you want to add in on the fact of taxation, TDS refunds. I think the tax man is the villain here if you consider a lot of startups.
Yeah, hi, my name is Sundar Rajan from UBCare Health. So it's I won't repeat the budget part. I think I agree with everyone. It has been quite a surprisingly good budget for startups. One point that I had earlier raised also, and I want to repeat, is on the aspect of regulation, especially in healthcare, right? I mean, telehealth and telemedicine hasn't found a good regulatory clarity there. And this is very crucial because healthcare is a very important sector, even on the agenda for the government. And if you want to have startups to play a role, then we have to unshackle them from these kind of things. I think that's one thing that will probably help. Second point that I was thinking is how would startups actually play a role in achieving the goal of the $5 trillion economy? I mean, in terms of contribution, essentially the top lines would not add up much so quickly, but the kind of innovations that would spur up the new business models that would be innovated, how could that be harvested and how could that be picked up by the biggies? I think that's a good point to reflect on and see what mechanisms could be set in, because the innovations are going to come from here. And if you want to make
and
the
how
leap
do you ensure you use those innovations
in the mainstream as quickly as possible? What kind of forums is created? Startups alone can't do it. So that would be a good mechanism for the country to pick up.
you need
overall.
ecosystem enablers to ensure that innovation also
Yes,
is
so
used in a timely manner.
Yeah, so
because-
forums like CII and NASSCOM could actually step up and say, how do we bring that into the mainstream, right? I mean, help them cross the chasm. The ones that are out to fall into the chasm should fall, but the ones that have able to cross over, how do you pick them up and take them to the scaling benefit of the industry?
All right. Anything in particular that you're unhappy about not being addressed for the longest time?
Nothing particularly unhappy about, but have our hawkeyes on how things will pan out. I think angel tax has already been addressed and it's been dealt what I would describe as a surgical strike, but but it remains to be seen how the income tax department will interpret the budget.
Because that's been one confusion, the fact that various departments haven't worked in spite of notifications being in place.
Precisely. So it's really up to the tax department to interpret the government here. And I think there's been a good positive development in terms of new investors entering the market. There's now an e-verification platform that has been announced, which hopefully will remove some of the trepidation new investors may have when entering the Indian market without fear of being perhaps hounded by the taxman. On the topic of investment, foreign direct investment has been relaxed for insurance. And there has been a mention of several other industries, particularly my own. I work in gaming. AVGC is one of the areas which has been promised to be addressed, but it remains to be seen how it will be addressed, when it will be addressed. So we're keeping a very close eye.
You're being patient to see what more comes out of what has already been announced.
Yes, precisely.
All right. No, I don't want to ask the cliched question to you, but as a women entrepreneur, first time we've seen a full-term women finance minister sort of present a budget. That's a success story in itself. Are you happy as a woman entrepreneur, or you feel a lot more has to be done to ensure, you know, workforce challenges, getting women back to the workforce, and also ensuring women do have what it needs to really start off and build companies?
Yeah, I think that was like the beginning. So I think we should all welcome the beginning. I would definitely see more in the future. Representing, like, a woman is representing the budget. That's like, you know, we always say a homemaker is the one who knows,
Manages
you know,
the
who
budget,
manages
yeah.
everything. So it's not just a cliche, you know, it's actually the truth, and that's why we see a lot of women entrepreneurs coming
I'm happy
up.
with
You know,
quite an equal representation.
yeah, and I come from research and design background, but I turned into entrepreneur, you know. So, and of course, I was always giving my texting to a person, you know, who was handling my text, because I was too involved in my research work. But I think I really agree what, he said, that we need more transparency. We need like a checklist, I guess. You know, we need something which is, if a person doesn't understand what is this all about, they can actually go to a platform like she mentioned. She can go, we can go to an event. We can go to like a place to go to, you know, where we can find all
Where
this
you can find
information.
all the answers that you've been
Yeah.
looking for.
See,
it's like
I read
having
some-
nirvana, right?
exactly.
Everything that you want to know.
Exactly. I read something really nice yesterday, and it was just a headline, just a very short headline was, startups needs to focus on innovation and not on the text. So that was like the feedback on the budget thing. And that's what I really echo for, because I feel we have a lot to do. I'm running a healthcare startup, a medical device startup, and we have a lot of activities, you know, which we need to focus on, and of course tax is one of the
No,
important
but
things.
let's also understand that startups, entrepreneurs cannot have a free ride as well,
Of
right?
course,
There
we don't want
There
to,
are
you
needs
know?
for,
Yeah.
but all you're asking for is a lot more clarity around those
Clarity on
regulations.
this, yeah, exactly. And I feel another thing, we do have a normal budget and a rail budget separately. Why not a startup budget? This could be as shorter, you know, shorter
that's,
thing possible.
That's an interesting suggestion,
You know?
coming from an entrepreneur,
Yeah, it's-
for a startup budget.
Yeah, because
Probably
I
the-
think all startups would be looking forward to that session more than anybody. Yeah, so I think that's what we need.
Okay, you have all 10 votes on the
Oh,
panel.
perfect.
For the-
Perfect. Yeah, that's what I would request for.
All right.
Yeah.
I want to, harp on the point that also entrepreneurs do get accused of asking a lot more from the government. SMEs or the Kirana shop owner also says, I'm an entrepreneur, but just because I'm not a tech entrepreneur, does that sort of deny me of benefits? So, do entrepreneurs really ask a lot, is my question really.
Let me introduce myself. My name is Puneet, and I represent a company called Sensivise. So I think there is a refreshing change which is happening, which is that suddenly the entrepreneurship and SMEs and startups are beginning to find a category of their own. You can look back, decades and decades of budgets which were presented. These were all rounding off errors. This is coming because largely the government is focused on innovation, and it also does see that this innovation would lead to sustainable companies and would lead to actually rise of employment in
Which
these
is a
sectors,
critical
right?
challenge at hand.
So it's not that we are having a free ride. We know that down the line there are expectations from us. I think the great thing is that the government is having their eyes and ears on the ground. For the first time, they are actually listening to what the requirements of the sector are. They are listening to what the expectations are. They are also finding out what are the irritants and what's not working and trying to address it. And I think that's a great positive step. The fact that some of these things will help us, we'll bring become sustainable companies. I'm sure it will actually begin to reflect in the results that the government is looking for. And even the entrepreneurs are in it for actually making themselves successful. So I believe that there is actually a great meeting together which is going to happen because of this.
So initially, it's for the initial few years that you want some clarity, and of course, once you become a company, then you're sort of paying taxes and coming back to this.
Sure, and I think there are just three things we expect, and I think the fact that these are being recognized and being addressed is a great positive. First is access to money. Second is access to market. And third is creating the right ecosystem. And I think all of these are being addressed in some fashion or the other in the budget. There is always going to be a list of things which could have been done, But I think the fact
We
that
always ask for
the
something
fact
more.
that this is happening and is being called out separately for MSMEs and startups, I think is a great
That's a
positive.
welcome. At least we are on the path, really. You want to sort of add in, you've patiently heard to most of the views, really. Anything that you feel hasn't been addressed?
Right. Yeah, so let me introduce myself. I'm Radhika, co-founder, CEO at Cradlewise. We are a baby tech company, so we are a consumer brand which involves many verticals, including electronics, soft goods, mechanicals. So where I want to come in and explain my perspective is regarding the manufacturing and the Make in India aspect. What we have experienced as a startup is we need components from other geographies to do R&D. So, but then we attract a lot of customs to even do the first prototypes. But our ambition is to be a global brand. I know there are there are different initiatives. Like if you are an export house, then you are waived off the customs.
Some concessions.
Some
in place.
concessions. But till we reach that stage, it's tough, right? Like we'll take some path before we can claim such
So
things.
some sort of incentives.
So for startups who are going to sell in the future for the in the global markets, but the initial cost, where the initial money is what actually is very crucial.
And it's usually very high, right? in
It's
terms of cost.
usually very high because we'll be ordering in small quantities, and the customs itself is a big killer. And also the consumer brands which are manufacturing in India and selling globally, there needs to be some incentive for this Make in India to become successful. Otherwise, there are many startups who are forced to shift to other geographies for manufacturing. And the other thing for Make in India is infrastructure, because if we have to actually make this successful,
You also have to have the basic
infrastructure
in place,
for
which
this.
is still not
Yes,
in.
yes.
That's interesting. You spoke about manufacturing hubs being moved out of India. The longest debate we've had is startups continue to be domiciled out of India. A lot of our most popular poster boys, startups, so to say, half of them are actually domiciled out. Anyone wants to add in on that, that perspective on, it is issues like taxation, issues like compliance, all of that play up, right? Why can't we have startups that want to be incubated here, be based out here, and even list here for an IPO?
So the listing norms over here are like 10-15 years old. They've never been changed, frankly. That's point one.
The SEBI has been working on something too.
But the SME exchange does not have volume enough for a startup to list and investors to buy. That's the second issue. If I were to say that the ESOP policy itself is a big headache, right? Having worked with very early stage startup and having been a shareholder, frankly, I don't know when I'm going to cash out. There's no thought of creating a secondary market to give them an exit. And the taxation around it itself is like at the time, right? It should be at the time of selling to an investor instead of at the time of buying from the company, right? And most of us here, we are from middle class. We don't have money, right? We are trying to. Even if I want to include ESOP as a benefit on a salary package, it actually isn't a benefit today.
Yeah.
Let me be very honest to you. It is more like I'm rewarding someone for the risk he is taking. He doesn't know if he'll have money to buy the shares.
At the right time.
It may so happen that the period also has to be defined, and the shares may lapse and the company takes off, and he lost out on the opportunity. And that has happened with a lot of people.
So that's like, you wanted to come in on something?
So I would like to sort of respond to your earlier question and a couple of sort of sentiments that were echoed earlier. Now you need to understand that startups are not necessarily mini versions of larger enterprises. I think that's a fundamental difference that we need to acknowledge. Startups are very ephemeral, very, very fragile, right? And have a very short lifespan before they become viable. And in my view, that, I think, sense of understanding and acknowledgement is not adequately, you could say, reflected in policymakers as well as most of the people who are trying to influence the ecosystem. In my way, they think that, hey, we are just smaller versions of large companies, and hence all the sort of regulations, requirements, etc., maybe
are sort of on par with what they expect of large companies.
But as somebody, sort of, as some of the colleagues were sharing, that today, if we are to focus our energies on doing one or two things, then it's easier to sort of focus and amplify our energies around that. But if we are getting
so make it very
distracted,
simple. The startup definition has been around. Put it down. Ensure all departments are following it. What DPIIT says is also, the tax department, CBDT is also taking them seriously.
Yes, and that's why we need to sort of be seen slightly differently in terms of both from regulatory requirements, taxation requirements, as well as other requirements. In my view, I think it can't be just said that, hey, something which is applicable, because here quite a few people are from the healthcare. I'll say that if just because it is applicable to a larger hospital does not mean the same level of regulations can be
rules and,
applicable here. And hence, that little bit of, you could say, customization is necessary, number one. Number two, I also feel that a lot of intent is positive, but I think where
It
they
has
get
to be
missed out,
backed with
where they
action.
get missed out is in terms of execution. If you see, a lot of healthcare budget in the previous terms have been underutilized by as much as 40 to 50% in most of the states.
Yeah, the fund of funds that we've spoken about, right? If you have announced it in a budget, the disbursement has been low. There have not been follow-ups really on that case.
Absolutely. So, which is where I think we need, sort of some sort of a bridge mechanism which can bridge between policy thinking and actual execution and the startups who benefit from it.
All right. You want to come in and then I'll have to close. I'm extremely out of time.
I think we've pretty much covered all topics of budget. Overall, it's a great budget 2019. So the point that you brought up about the women entrepreneurs thing, I think I definitely see it only getting better over the years. Things have definitely we've come a long way. And I think the current scenario, the whole importance that startups are given, and now is the time when the government has actually started, or we've started to place more value on startups, and organizations like NASCOM, CII, as someone mentioned,
And the Karnataka
and the
government also has
Karnataka
been very
government,
active here.
we've received a lot of support. And considering that the life cycle of a startup these days is only going lower, like it's no longer a time where we have 20 years, 25 years for a startup. So the cycle is definitely faster and shorter. So I think overall it's a great, it's a good end.
No, I'm so sorry, I'm completely out of time. I would have liked to have a lot more views, but the large takeaway really is, and should have sort of end this on optimism, but the point that one of the entrepreneurs brought up is the intent is there, it has to be backed by action on the ground. A lot more of the government departments have to work together. TD channel for startups is great. What they do with it is what they'll watch out. Taxation clearly at the heart of issue across angel tax, ESOPs, the TDS returns. So they want simpler norms for startups. And of course, the ease of starting up has always been asked for. Those are really the broad takeaways from entrepreneurs here in Bengaluru. But of course, yes, budgets and startups are now mainstream. We have the finance minister talking about startups so often, so that's a welcome move. So divided house, but of course optimism among entrepreneurs that things will do get better.
Well, there you go. That's my colleague Rahul Dhyama holding a chopal of sorts with various entrepreneurs in Bengaluru. With that, we're going to take a short commercial break, but stay tuned. On the other side, we're going to get your big voice. It's PhonePe. This is an interview you don't want to miss. Welcome back. You're watching Startup Central with me, Nayantara Rai. Once again, I'd like to thank you viewers for tuning in to Startup Central on a day we're seeing Virat Kohli and his men take on New Zealand in the semi-final at the World Cup. Of course, India is going to win and make it to the final and even win the final to bring back the cup. But having said that, here's the promised interview. It's with PhonePe, a big voice on the show. Digital payment platform PhonePe is gearing up for expansion with the backing of Walmart. How's this going to work out? How they're bracing for WhatsApp's full-fledged launch when it gets the clearance, and what is their stance on data localization? Remember, that's a political hot potato, with the Indian government and the Reserve Bank of India reiterating its stance on data localization on a day the US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo was in New Delhi. My colleague Rahul Dhyama caught up with Sameer Nigam, the co-founder and CEO, to get you this exclusive interview.
Well, Well, digital payments in India have really seen a massive boom in terms of how consumer habits are panning out. Also, the fact that there are multiple players in the fray, but one player that is sort of really standing out, of course, is PhonePe. We've seen PhonePe also find multiple mentions at the Walmart shareholder meet. The management has indicated they want to take learnings from PhonePe global, and analysts also indicating has Walmart really landed on a gold mine through the acquisition and getting PhonePe. And it took me a bit of convincing and a long haul one with Samir to join
Hi,
us
Rahul.
for a freewheeling chat to understand where are things really going. Samir, thank you so much for taking out the time and joining us. First thing, something I sort of started off also was, you know, at the Walmart shareholder meet, the sort of optimism for PhonePe, has that also been your big takeaway from your interactions with Walmart? They've already spoken about plans to take learnings global to markets like Mexico. So is this natural that, you know, a lot more of this will pan out in the years to come?
Well, I think fair to say we're feeling a lot of love and we're happy about it. I think payments and financial services is a relatively new area in the digital world for a company like Walmart that has a very, very large retail footprint globally. So yeah, I think we're operating in the adjacency of what they actually have in the physical stores across markets. And I'm hopeful that in the next few years we'll be able to sort of work with each other, whether PhonePe goes international or we work with Walmart's international teams and help them scale up their digital payments. It's going to be exciting.
But you know, what has really changed with Walmart coming on board? You know, it's been close to a year of the acquisition. I know you have had multiple rounds of interactions, the board meet. What has changed for PhonePe, or is it the fact that the focus really continues to be what it is, P2P transaction, merchant base that you've been constantly focusing on expanding, or has anything at all changed?
One, I think at the top, it's been a good year. It's been a year where we've settled down the reality that we now actually have a long-term strategic investor, and that really helps. That'll help the group overall. I think they're a very, very seasoned multi-generational company that's weathered many storms globally and just keep growing. So we're getting a lot of, I think we're growing up faster with them on board. I think governance, compliance, all of the functions that you expect for the multinational behemoth, I think we are also growing faster on those, which is all good. I think the other thing is that in terms of thinking globally, which is something that a lot of Indian startups struggle with, because our market's so massive and you're talking about a 10-year, 15-year view. I think it's opened our eyes up to the reality that this is a problem that's actually unsolved in most markets in the world.
True.
Digital payments is exciting in many of the geographies Walmart's already present in, and many others where they're
and
not
also
even
some of the
present
developed markets, right? They haven't really heard some sort of learnings here in India that can also be applicable to developed markets, right?
Exactly. So I think from that standpoint, there's a lot of synergies. Say the other area where it's actually fascinating is, given their dominance in the offline retail space globally, their understanding of small retailers, consumers, their behavior with retail is something that we are able to actually sort of use to accelerate our go-to-market with the kiranas in India. It has been the key focus for us last year. Our strategy didn't change. Our sort of optimism and energy behind actually getting millions and millions of kiranas connected has changed because we've seen how it plays out in other markets.
True. So there's, of course, potential to take it forward in a lot more markets. Coming back to the India side of the business, take us through where does PhonePe really stand in terms of, active users, UPI transactions. There's so much of data that is really coming by. Every competitor here trying to say, we are number one. Every month you have UPI numbers out. So where does PhonePe really stand in the scheme of things right now?
So when I think we stopped saying we're number one or number two or whatever, I think a year ago. I think there's too much noise. I don't envy any analyst in this market. I can share numbers. So June last month we did about 290 million transactions. Our annualized transaction value flow run rate has now reached 85 billion. We're amongst the largest in the world now, which is something I think a lot of us are proud of. It's not just us. I think the overall UPI network has now over 100 million users that are treating it like a banking network. So there's very large amounts of money moving on the platform, which is actually very heartening, right? Very different than the wallet story where it was all small ticket.
True.
So I think from that standpoint, super excited. As a platform, we now have over 55 million people coming every month. The merchant network, as I was mentioning, we're adding over 1 million merchants a month. We were 60,000 last June. We crossed 5 million last month. And by year end, we hope to get to about 10 million. And that actually has been the most fascinating part of the last year journey. I think P2P, recharge, bill pay, these are problems to be solved. Online payments is a problem to be solved. When you get to a Kirana shop, it's not just payments. There's discovery to be solved. There's delivery to be solved. There's financial services to be provided, working capital loans to be provided. So when we look at the merchant side today with 5 million merchants, we are now imagining a full sort of value-added ecosystem there.
So there are a lot of problems on the merchant side that are very interesting and challenging to solve. But coming to incentivizing the entire cashback game, would you agree that PhonePe has sort of scaled down that to focus on a lot more on merchants and drive adoption is here, but do you still have to incentivize a lot of what is coming by in terms of adding first-time users?
So one, I think I've read articles around peer-to-peer and some of the competitors' view. We have never actively invested on peer-to-peer transactions incentives. We did that twice for our 2-month window in the last 3.5 years, just to see what that does. And what's interesting actually is, without exception, the number of people that come and avail the cashbacks is a sliver. The number of people that are doing 4, 5, 6, 7 transactions a month is increasing steadily every month, which is what we like. I don't want 1 million people doing 100 million transactions. I want 100 million people doing 200 million transactions. So I think slow and steady is the way to win in this game, because you want 500 million people in the next 3 or 4 years doing digital payments.
So it's really a massive market.
So in fact, key milestone we crossed, which is more important for us, is that we now have over 100 million bank accounts linked on UPI. That for us is an important number, right? It tells you that the platform has the trust of 10 crore Indians. And we look at the game that way. So our incentives are typically sort of, our cashback is almost all loaded towards customers' first transactions. That takes the friction away of trying something new.
Got it. But Samir, I know I ask you this every time, and so much has changed over the last year or so. In terms of competition itself, and WhatsApp, we've been talking for the longest time, but now indications that with data localization norms being clear, there'll be a full-fledged launch. Amazon really upping the game. Where do you really see this going ahead? While of course a lot of analysts would also agree that there is scope for multiple players, experience will really be key. But the fact that, do you see WhatsApp really being the game changer, considering it still has that active number of users transacting here in India?
I think we discussed WhatsApp about a year back.
Yeah.
And I'd mentioned then, the longer they're not in the market, the more time we actually have to get build a base of our own, the less worried I am competitively, just absolute terms. As a 6-month-old startup, when they first announced a beta, like, wow, they're a behemoth. 150 million users along and 5 million merchants along. Honest answer is, I worry less. I think the way we are looking at this, one, for any industry to grow, you need the big enabling functions, distribution, capital, technology, all of those. UPI provided the technology. WhatsApp will in fact, or should, increase the penetration of the distribution. But I think the wildcard question is, can a chat platform convince 200 million people to link their bank accounts? All of us have found that is the biggest mental barrier. Once people use UPI or link a card and do one-click transactions, people don't stop. So is that the right platform? Obviously, I have a slightly different view to it. I think it'll take a slew of players, and each one will convince different segments, which is why it's good to have Amazon come in, Google come in, Paytm's there on UPI. You got players exclusively on the merchant side of it as well.
A lot more there as well, yeah.
Tons, a lot of crowding, right? There's 10 companies putting up QR codes every day. So I don't think we worry about market leadership in that sense. I think it's futile to talk about market leadership 3 years into an industry. We always make sure that we're in the top 3, no matter who the top 3 are, and that's also changed every 6 months. So I think that goes to focus. But are we worried somebody's launching? No, because if they don't launch, we won't know the potential of the market.
Yeah, how would you sort of also expand the market base? Makes it a lot more easier.
Everyone's going to come up with some new features, some new products, and you learn from them, you adapt to it, and you move on. I don't think we worry.
Which brings me to, of course, we'll come to data localization, but what really is the biggest focus area for PhonePe right now? Is it the merchant base, or are you experimenting? Of course, consumer experience is something that you'd always want to be on top of, but what is it one thing that sort of, is the biggest focus area right now?
I think
multiple.
I think last 12 months, without exception, has been expanding the offline network and giving more use cases to our consumers. I think that'll be the key focus for the next 6 months. But starting now, like if you ask me where all of my energy goes right now, it's in expanding the number of use cases on the apps platform that we have. That's the one that's
building an app ecosystem, really.
That's the one that's growing fastest for us, by the way, because baseline obviously is smaller, but we've got a lot of really, really good brand partners in there now, and now the middle tier sort of apps are starting to come in. So that one's super exciting for us, because when you have 50, 60 million customers every month, you've got a larger base of transacting customers than any individual e-commerce app in the country.
True.
And so if you can now be a meaningful participant in shaping the growth of apps and startups that are starting their businesses today, that's who we want to be.
That sort of be a
that
game
is
changer.
a huge game changer for us.
And the potential is also huge, considering
Massive.
apps are taking off in a big way.
Massive.
In terms of consumer habits itself. Samir, I know data localization, I always prick your brains on where things have stood. We saw RBI announce something, and they've come back and said that payments data should continue to be stored here in India, while it can be processed abroad, has to be bought back in 24 hours. How do you really say, you've been a strong proponent of the data localization debate itself, that Indian data, Indian consumer data should stay. Does that stand still hold good, especially with Walmart really now on board?
Walmart's been supportive from day zero. In fact, our comments on localization were post them coming on the investment side. See, I think what RBI has clarified again, which is useful, is that the data has to be here, because when you're talking about a PCR, a public credit registry, when you're talking about building a national risk and fraud system, any of these things, if the data isn't here, you can't build for the local market. And I'm not going to sort of the data sovereignty and the nationalist sort of sentiment. I don't care about those, honestly. This is way more about, can you build a really robust digital payments infrastructure without data staying here? I don't think you can. One is that. Second is on the privacy laws, and I think this is where the big sort of debate will be between domestic players versus multinational players, always. Europe took the lead with GDPR, saying it doesn't matter where you're based, it matters where the customers is. And our local laws have to apply for our citizens, because we have a higher sort of privacy standard. And I think that battleground will actually come to the fore. I think the Data Privacy Act or the Personal Data Protection Act is imminent. What shape or color it takes will determine how data moves across continents.
So there are still there's still a lot of work to be done.
I think there's a lot of conversations to be had, a lot of consumer education to be done, a lot of business motivations to be aligned upon.
Of course, the data protection bill would sort of give a lot more clarity on how
the PDBA will solve that. So I think what RBI has done is they've softened the stand a bit in saying that data can move out, be processed, and come back and be stored. Earlier they were saying that can't even leave. And we said this in a blog about a year back, that it makes sense to us that a Visa or a MasterCard or an Amex, a network level should be able to do it. I do have a different view on applications. I don't see the need for it, but I don't have an issue with it.
Interesting. Last couple of questions, and just give us a sense of consumers transacting on PhonePe. What's really the pulse? So many first-time users really getting on the platform. It's a big differentiator. Yeah. Online, offline coming together. The ease of it has improved. But how are Indians increasingly using PhonePe? What are those one or two trends that have really stood out for you?
Not surprisingly, offline kiranas, which is where 95% of India shops, has been the biggest growth fuel for us in the last year. From a market where we were doing barely a few thousand transactions a day to where we're doing well over like 1.5 million, touching 2 million transactions a day. That's just been explosive growth. And I think we knew that going in, that if you want to actually solve payments and make it systemic at a societal level, you'll have to solve transit, transportation, and offline kiranas. So you solved one of those legs, we'll have to look at the other two markets. But I think what's most fascinating, by the way, contrary to how a lot of analysts talk about India versus Bharat and going from urban to rural, we've actually started doing a lot of primary research on our customers, and they are diffused, I promise you, across more than 500 towns and cities in India, and in a very, very substantial way. I give this analogy to people when for the same number of QR codes in Bombay versus Nagpur versus Nasik and Pune, the stack rank on transactions is in the exact opposite order. So why these things happen, why people are adopting digital payments in different markets differently, I think it goes to how much friction you can reduce in their lives. How far are you from the closest ATM? How crowded is the market? If you have everyone doing pickups, deliveries, everyone's willing to do COD, your motivation to actually switch digital is less. But if you're in a small city where you don't want to actually sort of go somewhere for 2 hours and actually...
And it makes your life easy.
Makes your life easier. So I think not to pay your electricity bill. You don't want to stand in a long line to pay your electricity bill.
Gone are the days, true.
Yeah. So I think different age groups and different segments of society behaving very, very similarly across cities. It's can you save time and give convenience? I think that's still, interestingly enough, core value proposition is working.
Lastly, something I've observed interestingly is also PhonePe, betting on the gaming sports category. Do you see that sort of help you drive a lot of adoption? Mobile Premier League and now the World Cup also is, very strongly associated. That sort of builds into a larger play of reaching out to a large number of people, and that the fact that the sports category allows you to do that?
No, we definitely bullish on gaming as a category. I think it's a young society. Gaming's coming. The sheer adoption of these platforms is huge. We had, in fact, launched the Mobile Premier League as a partner on the PhonePe apps platform. We had to shut it down because of some differences with Google on their policies versus local policies. Those are the areas, as I said, I think there's market fault lines. There will be challenges and counter challenges, and they'll sort themselves out. But gaming is a very attractive opportunity.
And sort of see how it goes by. Wonderful talking to you, Samir, as always. Thanks for taking out the time so much. Thank you.
Welcome back. You're watching Startup Central with me, Nayantara Rai. Our email address on your screen. Tell us what you want to see on the show, what you don't want to see on the show. Pitch to us and be a part of Startup Central. It's the only show of its kind on Indian television dedicated to startups, entrepreneurs, technology, disruption, anything to do with the new economy. While we're talking about the new economy and innovation, we're today putting the spotlight on this particular medical startup headquartered out of Bengaluru, which has developed a neonatal breathing device addressing a critical issue in the country. It's a startup that has bagged the Commonwealth Innovation Award. What's this startup? What's so special about this innovation? How does it work? How is it changing lives? Here's that special report.
This medical device, built at 1/3 the cost, is saving lives of newborn babies. How, you may wonder. SARS, as the neonatal breathing device is called, can function in far-flung areas that don't have critical care facilities. It provides breathing support to premature babies and can work without electricity too. Koyo Labs, the startup, also backed the Commonwealth Innovation Award. In fact, Prince Harry, the youth ambassador of the Commonwealth, was present on the occasion.
So me and my partner Nachiket, we have spent almost around 3 months in a hospital to understand what are the most pressing unmet need in Indian healthcare settings, and that's where we saw a few cases where these neonates come from other hospitals to this tertiary care or big hospital with neonatal ICU. Till the time they reach to this hospital, either they don't survive this transport because they don't receive breathing support on time, or they have real severe brain injuries during their transport, and ultimately they face issues over their life. And when we saw this problem, we got shocked that okay, there is a piece of technology which is available, but it's not designed for the settings where it's needed the most. That's where the most number of babies in India are dying. So that's where we thought that can we take this concept, design in such a way that it can be more useful for our Indian settings, and that's where the concept of SARS got originated. Then we met one of our friend and doctor from Uganda. he also he was telling similar problems exist even in his country. His name is Dr. Data.
Yeah.
So with Dr. Data we discussed, and then we gave him this idea: can we make a CPAP machine or a breathing support machine for neonates which can work without electricity?
Got it.
So that was the whole idea.
That's the most innovative part about this, right? That you don't need ICU care, which is of course difficult to find in smaller cities, towns, villages. But also the fact that this does not need electricity. That's like a true Indian jugaad way of solving a problem.
Yes, so that is the fail-safe mode. So it came up from the necessity that most of the CPAP devices are imported, and since they are developed in the developed world, they have all the resources, they have the infrastructure ready for them to be used. But in India, a lot of times there's no oxygen, there's no electricity, and that is where we said, okay, we need something which is catering to the Indian masses. So we have developed a patented technology which works without electricity. And you just need to connect it with a ambu bag, which is the bag and mask respiration system, and it basically stabilizes the input air and gives the output supply at the desired pressures and flow rates.
With good medical care still being a distant dream in small towns and villages, the startup is planning to work on more products to bridge the gap. Their products are soon expected to go global, with Africa already testing the waters now. One impact at a time. A true Rise with India story.
Well, with that, it's a wrap on this edition of the Startup Central. Many thanks for tuning in. Folks, write into us. Tell us what you want to see on the show, don't want to see on the show. We'll be back same time tomorrow.